Hello, and welcome to Encounters with Polish Literature, brought to you by the Polish Cultural Institute, New York. I'm David Goldfarb, and I'll be your host. Today, we have Professor Bożena Shallcross from the University of Chicago back on the program to discuss what is considered by many to be the first Polish novel. The novel as distinguished from, say, the romance and similar kinds of genres, and we'll get into that distinction in our discussion. And this is by the Enlightenment poet, satirist, and writer, Archbishop Ignacy Krasicki, who lived from 1735 to 1801. Polish children sometimes encounter Krasicki's fables, many of which are available in a bilingual Polish-English translation by Gerard T. Kapolka, which was published back in 1977. And we tend to think of the fable as a didactic, moralistic, archaic genre. But it's worth recalling that these are Enlightenment fables, often compared to those of La Fontaine, with hidden barbs aimed at then contemporary figures and political situations, which I suspect are explicated in thorough detail in the notes of the Biblioteka Narodowa editions of the Bajki. In the American context, I suspect people are more likely to have read the novel translated by Thomas Hoisington as The Adventures of Mr. Nicholas Wisdom, because it fits so well into the context of the real and fictional travelogues of the Enlightenment, like Voltaire's Candide, or for Russianists studying Polish as a second Slavic language, Alexander Radishchev's Journey from Petersburg to Moscow. Bożena Shallcross has been our guest for episodes on Gombrowicz, Stanisław Lem, and Zbigniew Herbert, so you can go back to those episodes where she is thoroughly introduced. But we'll ask for an update at the end of the program to find out what she's been up to most recently. Bożena is professor of Polish literature and Polish-Jewish cultural studies in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures at the University of Chicago, as well as an essayist, translator, and art critic with a long-standing interest in the verbal and visual, who once told me that a scholar should always have something to say. So I know I can always count on her to have an intelligent appraisal of just about any subject in Polish literature. Bożena, welcome back to Encounters with Polish Literature.
Thank you so much. I particularly value this opportunity to speak about enlightenment because of the certain events taking place in my country, my home country, and especially in the political context. I find the Polish Enlightenment, the second half of the 18th century, to be a very useful example to follow, and in many cases not to follow. Just full of contradictions that connect the second half of the 18th century with the first half of the 21st century.
All right, so let's maybe we can introduce the Enlightenment in Poland. What was happening in Poland at this time?
The kingdom, Poland, is in a desperate need for a series of political reforms, of improvements, and they are definitely undertaken in the spirit of the Enlightenment. But it's not that we have a major representative of the Enlightenment philosophy, such as Immanuel Kant in the German sphere, or Rousseau in France. We have to somehow issue and discuss action. And that's what is happening. It's really in the proverbial 11th hour that Poles are introducing reforms. One of them is the often quoted formation of the Committee on National Education. They called very often the first Department of Education in Europe. But the crowning achievement of that time in the spirit of enlightenment is definitely the Polish constitution and its passing, its acceptance by the formal parliamentary body. So we have enlightenment in action, and we do not succeed. Ultimately, in 1772, we have the first partition, which is very poignantly mentioned in some letters that Archbishop Krasicki sent to his friends when he, being a part of the of Warmia, in German Ermland, he suddenly is realizing that there are German forces, military forces in that region, and it has a very powerful effect on him. The second enlightenment is in 1792, and the last one, the second partition.
Yeah.
And the last partition is taking place in 1795, and that's the ultimate one. And so we have those three partitioning powers, huge imperial presences that surround Poland and enter it and divide it according to their own needs. And in doing so, they eliminate not only the presence of certain formidable culture, but also the presence of a certain political discussion and deeds that very much worried, in particular, Catherine the Great and her German counterpart, Friedrich. So they actually succeed those three emperors, including the Austrian emperor. Austria didn't participate in the second partition, but they succeed in destroying Poland and destroying its political presence and destroying its administrative structure, and also in destroying any sense of statehood and identity of the country as it was at the time. This is really the context of the first Polish novel that we will be discussing today, and the novel also, in a sense, did not succeed in its calling for reforms, for individual subjective reforms, and for the reforms of the various aspects of Polish political and judicial, educational, etc. systems.
Yeah. So maybe you can say a few words about who was Krasicki, and what did he write aside from The Adventures of Mr. Nicholas Wisdom, the first novel in Polish?
David Krasicki was a man of a very refined taste. He was an educated abroad man, born in a very old aristocratic, but somewhat impoverished. It's a bit too strong a word to say that his family was impoverished, but definitely they didn't have the money and the power they used to have. He was born in Dubietsk, and very quickly left it as a person who didn't have any hopes for inheritance. He entered the priesthood and he was not, one of those mocked mercilessly French priests, the so-called labuś. In Polish, we had this word for frivolous and demoralized priests called labusie, from French, l'abbé. He was not like that. He was really a very erudite man of letters, first and foremost. He was a collector of books, a collector of travels, a collector of friends, political connections, but also plans. In Lidzbark, he had around actually quite a few formidable German friends, and they were cultivating gardens. Mm-hmm. And Krasicki spent a good amount of money on buying rare plants, and actually the books, travels, and the plants, also the sense of the need that he had of, making the whole space, the buildings, the headquarters of the bishoprics better. All this together resulted in his being in constant debt. And he was, when he lived in Poland, when he lived in Warsaw, he was a friend of the future Polish king, Stanisław August Poniatowski, in many ways. A man comparable in his erudition, sophistication, the taste, this knowledge of better things in life. They both were very much kindred spirits, and they both didn't have much chance to show heroism. Perhaps there was not too much of heroism in them, but some critics point out or tend to see Krasicki as an opportunist, as a person who changed alliances, switched alliances. He was, in times of the Finis Polonia, in the end of the of Poland, he was a very good friend of its king, and then especially when Warmia, and then became the had to report to Berlin, and later on when he became the Archbishop and the Cardinal,
Archbishop of Gniezno and Primate of Poland,
the main authority in the Polish hierarchy, church hierarchy, and had to reside in Gniezno in the Greater Poland, not far away from Poznań. At that time, he became very close to the German Friedrich the Great, who was in himself a powerful agent of enlightenment, but also in many ways he was, just a symbol of colonization. He's the one who invades Lower Silesia and grabs it from Austria. Silesia is the richest region of Central and Eastern Europe at the time. We have this very interesting situation when the head of our church participates in those very intimate meetings with the elite of the German aristocracy, and he is close to the center of power. He is, he goes to Potsdam, and there are those long-lasting evenings, and he, in his letters, Krasicki in his letters mentions with some sort of tenderness how, Friedrich, that little old man, Friedrich, how long he was staying with us and how happy he was. It was, of course, the company of men. Mm-hmm. Strictly men. Friedrich he lived in a closet. He was gay, but could not be gay. This was a very tragic aspect of his life. There's no time and perhaps no need to discuss his own trajectory of his life. But anyway, the center of attention of our Archbishop Krasicki moves from Warsaw to Berlin. And in fact, he dies in Berlin in 1801. And he is first buried there in the first in the first Catholic cathedral that was built in Berlin, and the cathedral that he consecrated. And only a quarter of a century later, his body is moved to Gniezno, where he's, buried for good. It's very, very also interesting. In the end of his life, in the same year as Immanuel Kant, he is invited to be a member of the Royal Academy of Sciences, an equivalent of, what we consider today, those choicest associations for intellectuals, public intellectuals, scientists, scholars. Each country and in each culture has such associations. Mm-hmm. So it just happened so by chance that the men who never met Kant and Krasicki are given the membership, and it's announced in the sort of a newspaper of the association, of the academy. Mm. And so I think that through this conduit, Kant learned about Krasicki. Krasicki must have known him much more earlier. But this is just an interesting biographical coincidence that tells us that Krasicki was very much respected in the intellectual hierarchy and the hierarchy of power in Germany. In our partitioning power.
And we know that he was translated, right? I mean, in 1776, yes. as soon as he published the novel, it was translated into German, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes, definitely. Here is the question. We needed a novel. It's we are in the middle of the 18th century, and the country needs to begin a formation of a novel for the sake of humanity, for the sake of Polish culture, for the sake of Polish education, for the sake of Polish literature and arts. We have a very rich epic literature, rhymed or not rhymed. We have a romance, but what we need is a serious novel, and in the very literal way, serious. Nothing frivolous, nothing that would be pure entertainment. And in this way, again, Krasicki is aligned with the aesthetics of the novel that Kant proposed. Kant was very much against the romance, which was the most dominant genre of the time. The romance was not a novel. It preceded, actually, the true formation of the novel. But Kant said that the romance is inciting passion. And that's wrong. It should not. It should give us the moral fortitude. It should not, rise us in a sinful way. And so entertainment in the form of a frivolous entertainment caused his distrust in the genre of the novel. And Krasicki tried to write a serious and frivolous novel that nonetheless has some elements of the romance, especially in book one. And he tried to make this novel to be a perfect enlightenment tool to create a discourse about who should be our model citizen, what he should do, how he should live his life, what was the value of experience in the life of the future model citizen, and what was the value of theory and just philosophical speculation in the life, in the trajectory of life of such people as Nicholas Doświadczyński. So Mikołaj Doświadczyński in Polish, it's a great name because Doświadczyński refers to experience that was greatly valued by philosophers of Le Lumière, the philosophers of Enlightenment, but it also was a kind of a tough thing for the translator to translate Doświadczyński into English and to keep this reference to the one of the tenets of Enlightenment was not an easy thing. Huysmans decided to change the name, and he changed it into wisdom, mądrość, which is, there is a name wise, of course, in English, but he preferred wisdom because wisdom was more essentializing. What was essentializing that sort of a final result of education and experience in life. We come in life to a point when we possess a certain wisdom. We are endowed with a certain wisdom. Krasicki had a very specific notion of what this wisdom is. But anyway, Huysmans decided that in English it would be Mr. Wisdom.
And it would be a name that wasn't, associated with any particular ethnicity or anything like that. It was an allegorical name in a way that befits Krasicki, who was an allegorist as well, right? I mean, he wrote fables and
satires.
There were great satirists. And we should say that even though he was trying to write something that wasn't frivolous, in The Adventures of Mr. Nicholas Wisdom, it is a very entertaining book. I mean, it's the first part is hilariously funny and is kind of satire and parody of the court, which of course Krasicki being a magistrate, he knew it well. So he's making fun of their obscurantist Latinism and the way that they dress. And when later Krasicki, Mr. Nicholas Wisdom decides to go and travel to Paris, Paris. He's a spendthrift. He spends too much money on clothing, and he makes 5 waistcoats when he's already borrowing money. He spends too much money on a lawsuit that he shouldn't have gotten into, and then at the end he has to borrow money, and then he goes to travel and he spends the money that's not really his. Yeah.
Yes. Well, actually, it wasn't that he followed the idea of a grand tour. He really committed a serious illegal thing when he accepted some fraudulent documents.
Yes.
And he committed other crimes. He escaped.
Yeah.
But it's really marvelous how Krasicki is fusing the escape from the law with the educational travel. The problem is, nonetheless, that Krasicki's character has no need for power, for knowledge, no quest as such. Travel as the quest for knowledge is not a part of Mr. Wisdom's vocabulary.
No.
He's traveling to entertain himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's traveling to, eat good food and to, in many ways, to confirm and affirm stereotypes that are totally against the Enlightenment spirit, such as the existence of some soccer in schools in Kraków that was really one. I mean, the magic, the lack of rational thinking that Wisdom inherited from his parents' manor somewhere in provincial Poland was a very distorting baggage that he was taking on this trip. And nonetheless, he had no critical distance towards himself, and he was actually in a way making those prejudices, those irrational, stupid, really, types of ideas even stronger. When he goes to Metz, he is quite surprised to meet there a person from his village, a certain Polish Jewish boy, Leibe, who goes to Metz to study, precisely to do something that Mr. Wisdom doesn't care about. Mr. Wisdom has no quest, no need for knowledge, no thirst for knowledge. His quest is really unformulated, it's nebulous, or maybe there is just nothing there. As you said, when he finally reaches Paris, he is just spending the remains of his family fortune, and eventually has to fly again, escape again. Has to flee again. I'm sorry. That's a very interesting concept in Krasicki, that he twice is actually using the act of disappearance as a certain narrative solution. And then, as we of course learn, actually he reaches Nipu because of the crash of the
okay
ship.
So we should say a couple of words about the structure of the work and what Nipu is. So we have the novel has 3 parts. In the beginning, he's going through these legal cases, and the legal case is so complex, I think, that it's like Krasicki doesn't want us to understand it because of its many layers and frauds that happen. And then he takes this ship, and they have a wreck on a deserted island. Well, not deserted island, an island that's a kind of utopia. So
yes. So the first book. Yes. So the book 1 is the book about how not to bring up a young child in Poland.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that is happening to Nicholas is wrong. And so we have this this attempt on Krasicki's narrator to affect us, to impact us through negative examples. The little boy has parents who have no idea how to raise him. The mother is indulging and is just a bit too tolerant for the boy and just doesn't give him any challenges. The father is a proponent of a whip, and the boy ends up in some rather questionable characters' hands, and these questionable characters are his tutors. He ends up in some illegal, very strange corners of the society, where mostly, well, I don't know, a sort of a mixture of pretense, but also business like brothel, and of course card games that he's getting more and more dependent on. And finally, we have, as you said, we have this powerful satire on the legal system. Again, he does what he's not supposed to do. He bribes and corrupts the already corrupted judges. But it's actually more complicated because his whole experience with his need to have justice done actually doesn't do justice to anybody. It leaves people corrupt. It leaves people injured, wronged, impoverished. Everything that happens to wisdom and what he does is destructive. And so we have this very negative book one. And we expect now some sort of a response, some sort of a reaction in terms of his adventures, but also in terms of the book's philosophy. This negative part of his life now is going to be contradicted by when he enters Nipu. And the Nipu is the island, utopian island, where actually we just consider the weakest part of the novel. I have just a word about this, but what is Nipu is? Nipu is really a sphere of pure philosophical speculation. And it's very descriptive. It's very ekphrastic in the ancient sense of the word ekphrasis. And it is very didactic without any results. His very long stay in Nipu and his exposure to utopia, it proves that utopia cannot be implemented in real life and in human beings. We just somehow, so it proves a posteriori, not a priori. He goes through the utopian phase in his life. He doesn't reject utopia a priori, but he rejects it. It's very interesting that he rejects it after a very long training by the main, the spiritual leader of the utopian society, at that point when another vessel crashes on the shores of Nipu. But anyway, he also finds he finds some items that will facilitate his escape.
Yeah.
And some critics say that what he found incited his greed. It's simplifying. I think that it really somehow made him realize who he is, and that it's time to leave this very abstract type of existence that is extremely important as a enlightenment value, right? I mean, utopia is the idea that even, in the 20th century, half of the world, or maybe the entire world, at one point or another, chased, and only to come to the conclusion that it's dystopia that is. Well, dystopia also artistically is more interesting because it's not simplistic, and it has drama. And drama is something that we miss when wisdom is on Nipu. But I wanted to say one thing, David. I wonder whether you would agree. This part, which, as I said, is considered book 2. It's considered to be the weakest of the whole novel. It is written in the language that I find fascinating. I mean, the whole novel, the language, and we know it. It inspired Gombrowicz's transatlantic, and not only this is just my favorite example, but. It is something that cannot be really fully translated. And Huizington did a good job.
Yeah.
But
Thomas Huizington, I like Thomas Huizington's translation. Has he translated anything else from Polish? I don't know.
I'm not aware.
Not that I know, but it was an award-winning translation. It was very well received. It's such an important work.
Actually, that's okay to go to the text written in the 18th century and to try to create an idiom, an English idiom, an idiom in English of that text was an enormous challenge.
Yeah.
And very laborious. I think he did well. I think that, with the older Polish texts, literary texts, in many ways, we had good luck. We don't have still such a great luck as far as Pantadeusz is concerned. That's my private opinion, although we have very competent translations. But we have a wonderful translation of Pasek's memoir.
Yes.
And that's where the Baroque idiom is coined. And there are very, very successful translations. But Pasek's memoir is full of drama. It's full of events and adventures. Pasek is not sent to a utopian island.
No.
No. But anyway, what is very interesting about this novel, that then, after opposing this negative part of the protagonist's life, we have him being molded by positive, highly moral influences. It doesn't work. He escapes. And then...
Maybe we should just say a little of what actually happened so our audience can follow. Is that, like at the beginning, we have this land dispute that has to do with a nobleman who's expelled from lands that Mr. Nicholas Wisdom claims are his family lands.
Falsely.
Huh?
It's a false claim.
A false claim, yes. But he claims this, and he pays many lawyers, and he pays a scribe to forge documents to prove this. And the person, he's been expelled from the land in the past, and his servants were murdered, and it's really terrible. And as a result of the lawsuit, well, he's bribed the right judges and so forth so that he wins. But then the case never ends. It comes back because, of course, the only people getting wealthy in this scenario are the lawyers and the judges who are being bribed. And but then on Nipu, there's another land dispute, right, where it's a matter of there's a stream going through some land that had been the dividing line, and because of a storm, a dam was wiped out, and that moved the stream. So the question is, there's a disputed area of land in between, and they just have a simple discussion, and everybody's respectful, and there's no forgery, and there's no lying, and there's no bribery, and everybody is friends afterward, and they all agree. And that's life in utopia without all this. And there's no. He also refers to the language that, on the one hand, the nobleman who's been wronged in the first case, the judge addresses him ostentatiously, with all kinds of Latin, and our utopian
very ornate language.
Yes, our utopian wisdom's teacher, whose name is unpronounceable in Polish, is Ksao or something like that. He says, why do you need more than one language? Why do you need so many words for everything? So they're all about keeping language simple so everybody understands, and everybody has the same amount of land, and everything is nobody goes hungry, and everybody is equal in this utopian society where not much happens unless you happen to get shipwrecked there.
But it's also a very confined society.
Yeah,
it's a society that actually does not want to include wisdom when they find out about his presence. They are extremely tough about removing all sorts of outside foreign influence. Mm-hmm. There is a sense of the outside influence as a danger, as an imminent danger that would destroy this platitude of utopia, this platitude of equality. And as a proof and as sort of a warning, they show there is a grave of somebody who actually transgressed and tried to use metal actually as a tool of murder and fight and war is totally forbidden in Nipu. So Krasicki, although his vision of utopia has many literary precedents, and he is just using it to and combines all those influences, and he creates a sort of a synthetic vision of what a perfect society should be. Mm-hmm. He cannot escape boredom, and he cannot escape this notion that people who live there have a very monotonous life. There's labor, there's harvest, there's food, but life is really unadorned. It's very simple, and our wisdom, after all, lived in a Sarmatian culture in Poland, mm-hmm. and it's very interesting how deliciously Krasicki describes old documents very, very old, dusty and molded documents, or the documents that are being forged, that, that the presence of objects, the presence of the material culture that is almost completely eliminated from Nipu is actually the cause for wisdom to abandon Nipu, to abandon this, safe idealistic existence. And he's punished for that because, and here another set of adventures starts. Some on, on the ship, he's enslaved. So we have a very serious, very, very serious moment when actually the question of slavery, which is a big issue at the time, is affecting our protagonist. Our protagonist will be enslaved actually for some time, and so he is in the mines. In the mines, he meets, or he is met by a certain a Protestant gentleman who is trying to improve the quality of the slaves working in mines, and who is trying to liberate them. And he is actually not an original creation. We would think, oh my God, Krasicki is such an amazing guy. He has this character who is working to remove this, any trace of slavedom in our life. But actually, such characters appear in numerous novels of the time. And Krasicki just lifted it. And what makes the novel still very original is the the realistic aspect of it. Is the fact that this character, the protagonist, is Polish, that he still has some that he talks in a way and thinks in the way that, only a certain Sarmatian nobleman could think. So, and despite all those...
Maybe you should give a gloss on that for our audience. Like, what is Sarmatianism?
Oh, it has two ways. There are two ways of talking about this. One is that it is the phase in Polish nobility's culture that is totally retrograde, that is totally unenlightened, based on undeserved privileges, and on a very self-aggrandizing notion of the myth of origin. According to the myth of origin, the Polish nobility, gentry, came from some steps from some very valiant knights whose name was Sarmatians, and so this is one negative aspect of Sarmatia and Sarmatianism. The other one is quite different, and many art historians and historians claim that actually this is the most original phase in Polish arts and Polish culture, that what the Polish gentry created by borrowing quite a lot from the Orient, to use this term that is now out of the vocabulary, that they created a certain culture that was synthetic at the same time, truly unique. And the best example, the best representation of this originality of Sarmatianism is the coffin portrait and the Sarmatian portrait in general. But the coffin portrait did a very realistic representation of a deceased person, a gentleman or woman. It's realistic, but it preserves also certain elements of their self-representation. So, a man has a mustache and his head is shaved, except the bottom, at the very top of the head, and et cetera, et cetera. I think the success of the coffin portrait has to do with the emphasis on appearance. Mm-hmm. That is extremely important.
Mm-hmm. The style of dress, of course, as well.
Yes, dress, weapons, mm-hmm. And also a certain behavioral panache. Mm-hmm. And as you have mentioned already, the language, the acts of the acts of speech that are very special, very unique, very floral, very ornate. Full of Latin. But also full of invocations of God and Mary and et cetera, et cetera. This, I will not get into the details of the Polish nobleman's attire, but it suffices to mention that actually Rembrandt executed two representations of a Polish man of the time, and one was it was not the time of Krasicki. It was a century earlier. One was the Polish nobleman that has this huge pearl earring in his ear, and huge mustache. And he's not really quite correctly dressed. There is a certain license, painterly license on part of Rembrandt. And the other one is a portrait of Lisowczyk, the portrait of a Polish rider that now is actually being questioned and being considered as done mostly by Rembrandt's workshop.
Right.
I don't know. It doesn't matter. Both paintings are wonderful, and both of them give us a certain taste of a very privileged class of people who live in a way that is, there's no labor. All what they do is they travel from one holiday in one manner to another manner to celebrate a name day, then to another manner for a wedding, and then yet to another manner for a funeral, and all what they do is actually dolce far niente, a life of leisure, because of the peasant class, which is totally, it's brutally exploited. Mm-hmm. And here comes, if I may make this, I think, necessary digression, our wonderful and only Helena Kościło, in the introduction to Heisington's translation, compares Krasicki's novel with Radищev's travel novel, travelogue, which Krasicki's novel, of course, is also a travelogue. And she concludes, she says that, Radищev has this very sharp critique of the peasant slavery in his novel. We know how dearly it cost him. And she says that it's a better novel than Krasicki. And I would like just to contextualize it a bit, because Radishchev had a very different goal. He didn't want to write a novel that would show the formation of an individual. Mm-hmm. He wanted to offer a very sharp critique of a very concrete situation in Russia. And he wrote it some 15 years later. Mm-hmm. And so much development in terms of the novelistic development occurred not only in Russia, but in the European and American novel and Polish novel as well. He mm-hmm. was, in a sense, in a better position. But his focus was different. Actually, the focus is so different that this comparison is in some ways maybe not unfair, but it's a stretch. So that's what I wanted to say, because what really happens in the novel, in Krasicki's novel, is a narrative about what it takes to create a fully mentally grown up, mature, and good and responsible individual. Mm-hmm. So it is the Bildung. It's it's a novel of formation, and it's, the answer is quite fascinating, because Krasicki says it's not a political engagement. It's not that you travel, and it's not even that you have a family. Actually, as long as you live overshadowed by a certain moral authority, by somebody who is like your mentor, who functions like your mentor, mm-hmm. you are not a mature person. And again, this is Kantian. That's how Kant's philosophy resonates here, I believe. And Krasicki says that Mikołaj Doświadczyński, that is Nicholas Wisdom, becomes this mature man only when he finally lives without any authority, mm-hmm. Physical authority, without a person who is his mentor. So there are no parents in his life, there are no teachers, there are no spiritual community leaders like in Nipu, and there's no Marquise de Grève, I believe, like in Paris. He is alone, and he already collected so much experience, mm-hmm. that he is wise in this sense. He is independent, fully grown. He is mature, and now he can live his life without any ethical blemish. And where does he live? He lives in the countryside. He returns to his village, mm-hmm. and he is trying to cultivate that village and the life there. He lives a very provincial life. He tries to then be engaged in politics, and this proves to be a disaster. Warsaw, the Diet, all this is nothing but a return, an echo of his experience with the Polish court system. So he gives up political engagement and continues his life without any mentors. He doesn't need mentors anymore. But, and here is a sort of a conclusion that comes from a genre of a romance. But he finds that girl whom loved when he was a very young lad, mm-hmm. and they live together. We don't know for how long. Anyway, that's the the composition of the novel is in is very interesting and very complex, because Krasicki has to be fair and objective to all those genres that he is introducing. It's really a salad of genres, that novel. We have letters. We have utopia, a separate genre. We have the travelogue, a separate, very popular genre. We have the romance. We have the comedy of morals. We have the social critique. We have the philosophical sort of an expose. What else we have in the novel? Adventures, especially when he's in the hands of those pirates. So it's all that Krasicki had to put together, and through his narrative, through his style, through his wonderful 18th century Polish language, he just created he created the first Polish novel. And I still recommend reading it in the original. It's much more joyful. Yeah.
For those who can, and that's a reason that everyone should learn Polish. I mean, it's Witkacy also called the novel a bag. You could put every genre in it, and he was very influenced by Krasicki, right? His character in the metaphysics of the two-headed calf is Aparura seems very much based on Sao, this native wise thinker who and so Krasicki, even though it's 18th century, it's about modernity. That's the thing that strikes me as so interesting about Krasicki, is it's
absolutely.
That it comes across as modern, in ways that appeal to the avant-garde, in ways that apply to many other periods and genres. So
yes, but of course he also is introducing to the Polish reader the new world. Yeah. He is describing America. He is describing both North and America, and the mines that are in the South. He is fulfilling the educational goal of the Enlightenment novel. He is teaching us, but ultimately he also is creating a very sophisticated and not didactic necessarily dialectical composition. So I rather would reject the idea that the novel in its composition follows Rousseau's 3 stages of human life, childhood, maturity, and experience, maturity. For me, it is dialectical. So we have book 1 as a certain thesis, negative thesis. And then we have a counter thesis, the opposition, the good land, the good people, the good ideas and philosophy. And then finally, after all this is washed out from the character, we have a synthetic existence in this little village somewhere in the margins of Poland as a culture. And so it's amazing. And it's amazing how he uses antinomies throughout the novel. And it starts with the description of Nicholas's parents and their pedagogical methods. Strict upbringing versus indulgent, very liberal upbringing. And so he is, for him, the antinomy is really the engine for the novel. And the engine for the dialectical movement. The point when it shows what dialectics can do in a novel is when he goes to Nipu. And then we have what, Benjamin describes as a dialectical pause, as a paralysis. Then we have a standstill.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, it's even more intensified when we realize that actually Doświadczyński didn't absorb much from Nipu, that he has to run away. He has to confront not philosophy, but life. It's a marvelous novel.
It is. So on that note, what are you up to these days? What's your next project?
Oh, I just had this. I wrote the introduction to Piotruś.
Right, right.
We talked about this a bit. Do you have it in hand?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah.
Piotruś. I should show the image. This is published by Vine Editions, and it's translated by Anna Zaranko, and it's by Leo Lipski.
Yes.
I'd like to do an episode on Lipski, so we'll see.
Yeah, but there will be, there are so many experts on Lipski, in Poland especially. He is very much underappreciated, so I think it's a great idea. And I am at this point completing a project that was in the back of my mind for 30 years. Actually exactly 30 years. I wrote one chapter, then decades passed. I wrote it's about the life of the text. And so it's entitled Inscriptions and Other Marks. So the first stage that I describe in this book is the pre-verbal stage of doodles, drawing, scribbling. And then, of course, that's what we do, we literary scholars. And there's the text, which I skip because we all do focus on text. So, but what follows, and what is actually, in a sense, the beginning of the demise of a paper book and of a text, is the fragmented existence of the text only through citations that are mobile and ubiquitous. So you see a citation on a coffee mug, a citation from, let's say, Thomas Mann or Mrs. Montessori, and very often without the name. There's no philology. So the connection, the living connection between the original text and all those citational forms disappears. You go on streets and you see citations. You go to a restaurant in Hyde Park and you see 3 citations from very different authors. Citation is everywhere, but it is really a signal that literature is ending in gadgets. That that we have on our ties. Men have some citations from ancient languages that our bags are full of citations, covered with citations, and it's really a certain very critical moment in the life of the text. So it's post-verbal, it's post-textual. I'm sorry.
Interesting.
So, doodles and citations.
Very, very, very good. I look forward to reading that. So thanks so much for joining me again on the program.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
Wait up. Please subscribe and click the bell to stay on top of the program. Watch the credits for some recommendations about how you can support aid for Ukraine and for Ukrainians fleeing the war in their country. I'd like to thank all the people who helped make this series possible. The Polish Cultural Institute New York sponsors our program. Bartek Remisko, head of humanities and literature at the Polish Cultural Institute New York, is our executive producer. Natalia Iudin is my fellow producer and editor. Our opening and closing music is by Radek Przedpełski. Thank you all for listening and reading along with us. Let's meet again in a month when we'll be discussing some of the works of the Romantic bard Juliusz Słowacki that might be considered to be part of the Ukrainian school in Polish Romanticism. See you then.
Jest to szary dzień, jak zawsze w tej okolicy. Cała sceneria wydaje się chwilami fotografią z ilustrowanej gazety. Tak szare, tak płaskie są domy, ludzie i pojazdy.